What if the child you raised with your whole heart was never biologically yours and your partner never told you? Tonight, the fairy tale shatters. Meghan Markle is in full panic mode after the surrogate who allegedly carried Archie comes forward, not just with claims, but with receipts. Private texts now leaked show Meghan allegedly selecting a sperm donor for ethnic optics without Prince Harry's knowledge. A preferred donor, a hidden agreement, and a chilling message. It's better he doesn't know. This isn't a tabloid headline. This is a direct hit to the crown, the bloodline, and the man who gave up everything for love. Stay with us, before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. It was a quiet morning in Montecito when the first ripple broke the surface. No headlines yet. No TMZ alerts. Just a single, anonymous post on an obscure forum known for whistleblower leaks. The post was short, almost cryptic. She picked the donor. He didn't know. I was there. For most readers, it didn't register. But within hours, a screenshot of private messages appeared. The profile name was redacted, but the words were unmistakable. Someone claiming to be the surrogate who carried Meghan Markle and Prince Harry's child was making an explosive claim that Meghan had chosen a sperm donor for Archie without ever telling Harry. That everything the world believed about their son's royal bloodline was a carefully constructed illusion. And Meghan was allegedly behind it all. By mid-morning, those whispers turned into an online storm. Blogs, Twitter threads, Telegram channels, and private Discord groups were aflame. Was this real? Could it be true? And more urgently, what would this mean for Prince Harry, who had already walked away from his family, his legacy, and his country, for a woman who may have betrayed him at the most personal, biological level? Let's be honest. In a world overrun by scandal fatigue, it takes something genuinely shocking to get people's attention. But this was nuclear. A betrayal not just of love, not just of royalty, but of blood itself. The idea that a prince could raise a child who wasn't his and never even know? It hits a deep psychological nerve. It challenges everything we believe about family, identity, and trust. And then came the text messages. Screenshots began circulating that seemed to show private conversations between Meghan and the surrogate. The context was chilling. Meghan allegedly discussing a preferred donor, making reference to ethnic optics and how it would play well for the couple's public image. In one message, the word brand appeared twice. There was no mention of Harry, no indication that he had ever been consulted or informed. Just Meghan, orchestrating what should have been a deeply personal decision like a PR strategy. Cold, calculated, ruthless. It didn't take long before the mainstream media caught up. By the afternoon, headlines began emerging from less risk-averse platforms. The Daily Mail ran with it first, followed by TMZ, then Fox News. CNN waited. BBC held back. But by nightfall, even the big names had to weigh in. Was this just another wild conspiracy? Or was there something disturbingly real about this particular rumor? Let's go back a few years. When Meghan and Harry welcomed Archie into the world, speculation about the birth was immediate and fierce. The palace had been unusually tight-lipped about the delivery. There were no official photographs taken outside the hospital. No candid moments with the attending physicians. Just a formal announcement and a staged appearance days later. Some tabloids whispered that Meghan hadn't carried the child herself. Others suggested a surrogate was involved. But those stories were quickly buried, dismissed as misogynistic or racist. And maybe they were. But what if the speculation held a kernel of truth? What if there really had been a surrogate? And what if that surrogate had just dropped a truth bomb that could fracture what's left of the Sussex fairy tale? In the days following the leak, public attention surged toward one key question. Why would Meghan do it? Why, in a marriage where the stakes were already so high, would she hide something so monumental from the man she claimed to love? Was it about control, image, or something even darker? To understand the gravity of this alleged deception, you have to step inside Harry's shoes. Here's a man who gave up everything, his title, his country, his military roles, and his familial safety net. He walked away from it all, publicly, defiantly, to build a new life with Meghan. He defended her against a relentless media. He took on his own family. He relocated across the world. And if the surrogate's claims are true, he did all of this for a child who may not even be his. The psychological devastation would be impossible to overstate. Imagine believing you've become a father, watching your son grow, holding him for the first time, teaching him to speak, and then learning that none of it is biologically true. that someone made that decision for you, that your partner made it not out of necessity, not due to a medical emergency, but because it made for better optics, a better brand. The betrayal wouldn't just be personal. It would be existential. Now add to this the royal context. Bloodlines are not just symbolic in monarchies. They are the system, the foundation. The very legitimacy of titles, inheritance, and power flows from blood. If it's true that Meghan used a donor, and if Harry was unaware, that revelation wouldn't just destroy their marriage. It could unravel Archie's place in the royal family entirely. Questions about succession, about legal identity, about fraud, it all opens up like a legal minefield. And then there's the surrogate herself. Her identity, though still technically anonymous, has reportedly been narrowed down by investigative reporters. Leaks claim she's a California native in her 30s, with previous surrogacy experience. A college graduate. Financially stable but allegedly offered a large payout to remain silent. So why speak now? According to sources close to the woman, she had been experiencing increasing guilt. She felt manipulated, used, promised that everything would be clean and simple, but watched as Meghan allegedly began making choices that felt deceptive and self-serving. The surrogate, these sources say, was pressured to hand over control and keep quiet. But she began documenting everything, every message, every transaction, every odd request. And when she saw what was being said in public, the smiling family photos, the storybook narrative, she finally snapped. In a private message allegedly sent to a friend, the surrogate wrote, "She didn't even tell him. I swear to God, I don't think he knows. I asked her twice if Harry was okay with the donor. She changed the subject both times." This is where things get truly chilling. Because if that's true, if Meghan changed the subject when asked directly, it suggests not just deception, but premeditation. A deliberate effort to keep Harry in the dark. And not just during the process, but permanently. She allegedly intended for him never to know. Which leads us to the next horrifying question. Does Harry still not know? Is he discovering the truth the same way the rest of us are, through screenshots posted online, through a viral thread, through secondhand media stories? If so, then we're witnessing one of the most brutal betrayals of modern celebrity history unfold in real time, and the man at the center of it might still be catching up. There's also a deeper cultural question here. We live in an era where branding has crept into every corner of our lives. From influencers curating their baby announcements to celebrities launching lifestyle products named after their kids, the line between personal life and public image has all but vanished. But this story takes that trend to its most disturbing extreme. A child, allegedly created not through shared love and mutual consent, but through a strategic choice to enhance racial optics, to appeal to a global audience, to build a brand that felt inclusive, progressive, and untouchable. If true, that's not just manipulation, that's exploitation. And it goes against every instinct of parenthood and partnership. It reduces the miracle of life to a marketing decision. Of course, there's still the possibility that this is all a hoax, that the screenshots were doctored, that the surrogate has an axe to grind, that Meghan is innocent, and this is just another chapter in the relentless campaign against her. But even if the story proves to be false, the very fact that it's plausible says something profound, something unsettling, about how far Meghan has fallen in public trust, about how much Harry has risked, about how fragile the illusion of control really is. And as the days unfold, the silence from the Sussex camp grows louder. No denial, no press release, no lawsuit, just silence. The internet, however, is anything but quiet. Everyone has an opinion, a theory, a reaction. Some defend Meghan with religious fervor. Others call for investigations, DNA tests, custody battles. And through it all, one face remains heartbreakingly absent. Harry. No public appearance. No comment. No leaked source from friends close to the prince. Just stillness. A storm is coming. Or perhaps it has already arrived. And the man who gave up a crown for love may soon learn that even fairy tales can end in betrayal. Let that sink in. This is just the beginning. Before the world ever suspected that something wasn't quite right with the origin story of Archie Harrison Mountbatten-Windsor, everything seemed to follow the script of a royal fairy tale modified for the Hollywood age. The public knew of Harry and Meghan's pregnancy announcement during their Australia tour, the bump cradled lovingly, the glowing photos, and the staged moments of domestic bliss. But behind those polished images was a different reality, one that very few people knew existed. One buried beneath legal paperwork, confidentiality clauses, and an orchestrated silence that stretched across countries and financial agreements. It starts, allegedly, with a single decision behind closed doors at the Sussex residence in Frogmore Cottage before the couple eventually relocated to North America. Meghan had expressed concerns about the physical toll of pregnancy, citing age and other private health matters. But according to insiders who've recently come forward, her motivation wasn't purely medical. From the beginning, Meghan was more focused on control over the process, the image, the narrative, and most disturbingly, the genetics. Multiple insiders now allege that it wasn't Harry who first brought up the idea of using a surrogate. It was Meghan. Her reasoning was that it would protect her from the same kind of scrutiny that plagued Kate Middleton during her pregnancies. There would be no speculation about how much weight she gained, no comparisons to Diana's baby bump. She could remain in the spotlight on her own terms, fashionably photographed, without enduring the physically unpredictable nature of childbirth. But the conversations didn't stop there. What has come to light in the aftermath of the surrogate's leaked messages is the startling level of secrecy involved in the process. Most celebrity surrogacy arrangements involve multiple layers of professionals. Doctors, attorneys, counselors, ensuring that both intended parents are actively involved. But according to sources close to the situation, Meghan conducted much of the preliminary surrogate selection without Harry's presence. She allegedly conducted virtual interviews, read over health reports, and even asked detailed genetic and ethnic background questions, all before Harry was properly informed that surrogacy was even being finalized. This leads us to the paperwork. A standard surrogacy contract in California, where the arrangement is believed to have been finalized, is an intense legal document, often hundreds of pages long. It defines parental rights, outlines responsibilities, sets medical parameters, and establishes the legal chain of custody post-birth. In most cases, both intended parents must sign off on every clause, from embryo implantation to delivery terms. However, a new leak from someone allegedly involved in the legal review process suggests that Meghan insisted on separate legal teams. She framed it as wanting to streamline the process, but the reality, sources claim, was that it allowed her to introduce certain stipulations without Harry's knowledge. One of the most unsettling allegations involves the donor selection. Unlike traditional surrogacy where both intended parents provide the genetic material or at least give full consent to the donor, this case allegedly involved Meghan selecting a sperm donor independently. According to the surrogate's messages, Meghan made specific requests about the donor's features. She was looking for someone of partial African descent, with lighter skin, athletic build, and high academic aptitude. The surrogate texted a friend, saying she said she wanted the baby to look relatable to diverse global audiences, that it was about building a face for the next generation of royalty. This, if true, is where the ethical lines begin to blur into something far more insidious. There's a stark difference between choosing a donor based on health compatibility and choosing one based on marketability. To shape a child not based on mutual love or biology, but on how the child might fit into a global PR narrative, reflects a level of image obsession rarely seen even in celebrity culture. The surrogate, as she describes in the leaks, was deeply uncomfortable. She allegedly voiced her concerns to Meghan in a private exchange, saying, "Are you sure Harry's okay with all this?" To which Meghan allegedly responded, "It's better he doesn't know. Less to worry about." From that point on, the surrogate felt trapped. By then, the contract had been signed. Money had changed hands. The fertility clinic had received instructions. According to confidential documents now under scrutiny, the donor was listed under an anonymized numerical code. Meghan had allegedly negotiated a clause that prevented the surrogate from ever contacting the donor or inquiring further. It was all tightly controlled, deliberately obfuscated. The paperwork left little room for questioning, by design. It is important to note how these types of contracts work in California, which is one of the most surrogacy-friendly jurisdictions in the world. The state law allows for pre-birth parentage orders, meaning intended parents can be legally recognized as the child's parents even before the baby is born. In this case, Meghan and Harry would have been listed on the birth certificate without the surrogate's name appearing at all. This is standard in such arrangements. But what isn't standard is the level of isolation the surrogate reportedly felt once the procedure was done. She was allegedly cut off from contact and only received legal updates via Meghan's team, not through a joint communication channel as is common. The surrogate's growing unease reportedly intensified during the second trimester. She claims she asked again about Harry's knowledge of the donor. Meghan allegedly responded tersely, saying he wouldn't understand. This is for the best. The surrogate kept the messages. She printed them. She told a friend that something didn't sit right with her. That despite the money and the agreements, she felt complicit in something deceptive. Something royal, but rotten. It's difficult to verify every aspect of these claims, especially given that Meghan and Harry have not issued any formal statement about the surrogate's identity or the arrangement at all. For years, they have maintained a vague narrative about Archie's birth. Meghan's bump was inconsistently visible in public appearances. The timing of the birth announcement was delayed. No medical team from the palace was ever publicly named. At the time, fans were charmed by the couple's need for privacy. But in hindsight, the silence is being reinterpreted as something else, concealment. Now, with these messages out in the open, that silence feels like the scaffolding of a lie. Adding to the intrigue is the involvement of a discreet fertility agency rumored to have handled high-profile clients, including tech moguls and Hollywood elites. Anonymous employees from the agency have hinted, without explicitly confirming, that Meghan was a very controlling client who made non-standard demands about the selection process. One source even stated, she wanted to know what the donor's childhood photos looked like. Not just medical history, actual baby pictures. That's rare. If Harry was not part of these decisions, it speaks volumes about the nature of their relationship behind the scenes. It suggests a hierarchy of control where Meghan was not just the spokesperson of their union, but the sole strategist of their family planning. In that scenario, Harry becomes less of a partner and more of a prop, an image in the story, not a collaborator in its creation. And then there's the financial element. According to leaked documents from a trusted source, the surrogate was allegedly paid over $250,000 for the arrangement. This figure includes medical expenses, living stipends, and a signing bonus. While not illegal or even unusual in high-profile surrogacies, what stands out is the aggressive non-disclosure agreement she was required to sign. The NDA reportedly extended beyond birth, restricting her ability to speak publicly, write a memoir, or even discuss the experience in private counseling unless the counselor also signed a confidentiality clause. That level of restriction is unprecedented in most standard surrogacy arrangements and points to a deliberate effort to bury all traceable evidence of the child's true genetic origin. Yet despite the ironclad terms, guilt has a strange way of unraveling secrets. The surrogate, according to one of her confidants, kept a physical binder of messages, contracts, receipts, and emails. For years, she kept them stored in a safety deposit box under a pseudonym. Not because she intended to blackmail or extort, but because, in her words, I needed to remind myself it actually happened. It wasn't until she watched an interview of Harry praising fatherhood, talking about how Archie had his nose, his eyes, and my ears, that something inside her snapped. She allegedly whispered aloud to the television, "He doesn't know. He really doesn't know." Her friend encouraged her to come forward, but the surrogate resisted. It was only after receiving legal threats related to an unrelated surrogacy case that she decided to act. She feared that if she didn't tell her story now, she never would. And so, the screenshots began appearing. Carefully chosen. Names blurred, but messages clear. The timeline established. The implication unmistakable. This section of the story paints a haunting picture. One of manipulation under the veil of progressiveness. Of a woman constructing not just her image, but her family, as if casting roles in a film. A prince unaware. A surrogate emotionally torn. A child caught in a web of optics and legacy. The question we are left with at this point in the journey isn't just whether Meghan lied. It's whether a child was created for the purpose of maintaining a narrative. And if so, what becomes of the truth when the story was written in such carefully chosen ink? It was the kind of leak that doesn't come with a warning. No slow drip, no teaser headline. Just a sudden flood. A social media account, previously dormant, with only a few followers and zero credibility, posted a thread titled simply, "You need to see this." Screenshots attached. That was it. No hashtags. No tags to media outlets. No apparent agenda. Yet within hours, that single thread would send shockwaves through Buckingham Palace, across the Atlantic, and into every corner of royal commentary around the world. What made these screenshots so devastating wasn't just what they said, it was how real they felt. The phrasing, the tone, The timestamps. The unmistakable intimacy of someone speaking with confidence, thinking the conversation would never see the light of day. The messages, allegedly between Meghan Markle and the surrogate who carried Archie, didn't just suggest dishonesty. They pointed to a calculated deception, one carefully woven, brick by brick, not out of necessity but ambition, out of branding, out of image control. The first screenshot was timestamped months before Archie's birth. The conversation opened innocently enough. Meghan, writing with friendliness and emojis, discussed logistics, supplements, travel arrangements. "So grateful we found you, cherry blossom yellow heart," she wrote. But within minutes, the tone shifted. Meghan began discussing a few tweaks to the original agreement. The surrogate, in her reply, seemed confused. What kind of tweaks? The response that followed was like an emotional punch to the gut. "I feel more secure using a donor that aligns with the vision we have. Someone who reflects the brand we're building. Global, inclusive, strong. Harry doesn't need to be involved in that choice. It'll only complicate things. Aligns with the brand." It was that line more than anything that detonated across the internet. Commentators, psychologists, branding experts, and cultural critics immediately jumped on it. Was Meghan saying she had selected a donor for the child she would raise with Prince Harry not based on love or shared values, but based on how the child would look? On how the child would fit the global image they were cultivating? The next few screenshots were even more damning. In one, Meghan allegedly told the surrogate, "We're going to be raising the face of the next gen of royals. This isn't just a baby. It's legacy. The optics matter. I've shortlisted 3 donor profiles. I'll forward them today." The surrogate replied with a question that would haunt every corner of the royal discourse for weeks to come. "Does Harry know?" Meghan's reply was cold. "He trusts me. That's enough." In that moment, the tone of the narrative around Meghan Markle began to shift. Even those who had long defended her against palace racism, against relentless media scrutiny, paused. What began as a story of a woman fighting against institutional oppression was now revealing cracks in its foundation. Cracks that suggested Meghan wasn't just a victim of the media machine, but possibly its most skilled operator. More screenshots followed. In one, the surrogate asked again whether the donor had been finalized. Meghan allegedly replied, "Yes. Went with profile 2. Mixed background. High IQ. Great jawline. Should compliment mine well. This will be a beautiful child." There it was again. The meticulous curation. The attention to physical features. The obsession with optics. It wasn't just about having a child, it was about designing one that would fulfill a vision. One that could play the part the world expected of them. A child as brand ambassador. Another screenshot contained a logistical conversation about timing. Meghan reportedly wrote, "Once the transfer is complete, we'll announce we're expecting. We'll play it low-key, maybe a brief media note. Then stage something for public interest once we have the heartbeat confirmed." The surrogate responded, "Do you want a medical team in the UK involved?" Meghan replied, "No. Too many leaks over there. We'll keep it in California. We'll tell the royals it's a private matter, just to avoid noise." At this point, even some of the most ardent Sussex supporters began demanding answers. The level of manipulation in the messages was stunning. Not only was Meghan allegedly hiding the donor selection from her husband, she was also planning to stage manage the pregnancy announcement to maximize press impact, while minimizing scrutiny. Every detail was considered, every variable accounted for, except, it seemed, the truth. The screenshots also revealed an unnerving power dynamic between Meghan and the surrogate. At one point, the surrogate expressed discomfort about not informing Harry. "I really think you should tell him. It doesn't feel right," she wrote. Meghan's alleged reply was clinical. "We're paying for your silence. We're paying for your trust. Please remember the terms." The message wasn't violent. It wasn't overtly threatening, but it dripped with corporate precision, as if the entire pregnancy was less a personal journey and more a project rollout. The surrogate, based on follow-up messages, tried to reassert her concerns. "This isn't about money. I just don't want to be part of a secret that could blow up later." Meghan responded simply, "It won't blow up. Unless you talk." The chilling finality of that sentence became a rallying cry online. Within 24 hours of the screenshots being published, #UnlessYouTalk began trending globally. People began dissecting every photo, every interview, every detail from Meghan and Harry's past statements, comparing them with the newly released messages. What had seemed like minor inconsistencies before were now viewed in a different light. Why were there no hospital records? Why was Archie's birth certificate altered? Why did Meghan refuse to reveal the names of her doctors? The questions, once brushed aside, now screamed for answers. A body language analyst with a large YouTube following posted a 30-minute video comparing footage of Meghan discussing motherhood before and after Archie's birth. Notice how her tone changes, the analyst noted. In earlier interviews, she talks about the idea of motherhood in very abstract terms. After Archie's arrival, she avoids discussing the birth itself. No labor stories. No, he has his father's nose. Just rehearsed language about joy and privacy. The analyst video went viral. Within hours, other investigators, both amateur and professional, began pouring through archived footage. A Reddit thread unearthed an early interview in which Meghan accidentally referred to Archie as the little one we waited for, rather than the one I carried. Most people had chalked it up to poetic language. Now it felt loaded with subtext. Even more disturbing was a message from Meghan in which she wrote, "The bloodline will be preserved in public imagination." That's what matters. The world won't ask for receipts. But the world was now asking. In the chaos that followed the release of these texts, Prince Harry remained conspicuously absent. He was last seen 2 days before the leak during a charity Zoom event. There, he spoke animatedly about resilience, family values, and the importance of honest conversations. His appearance seemed upbeat, genuine, even happy. But the timing was cruel. The man who had dedicated his life to protecting his wife and child was now at the center of a global spectacle questioning the very foundation of that fatherhood. And while Meghan's supporters initially attempted to discredit the messages, calling them forgeries or deepfakes, independent experts were brought in. Digital forensics specialists confirmed that the screenshots did not exhibit signs of manipulation. The font consistency, timestamp alignment, and metadata suggested they were real. At least some of them. The surrogate, still unnamed publicly, was reportedly cooperating with a private investigation. Sources close to her claim that she is not seeking money or revenge. She just wants the truth out, said one friend. She thought Harry deserved to know. The final screenshot in the leak was the most heart-wrenching. In it, the surrogate wrote, "You can't keep this from him forever. It's not fair. He has a right to know who his child is." Meghan's alleged reply. "He has a right to love the child. That's all that matters." Those words triggered an avalanche of commentary, analysis, and heartbreak. Was she right? Does love alone make someone a parent? Or does the truth matter too, especially when that truth is buried to preserve a public image? This was no longer just a royal scandal. It had become a global conversation about truth, parenthood, identity, and image in the modern world. And for Prince Harry, a man already haunted by loss, institutional betrayal, and the weight of royal expectation, the silence said more than any press release ever could. When the news first broke, Prince Harry was in London on private business, reportedly meeting with charity leaders for an upcoming veterans' mental health initiative. By all public accounts, it had been a quiet, productive day. There were no paparazzi shots of stress, no leaked expressions of concern. But behind the gates of the private estate he had chosen for his brief stay, something seismic had happened. The leaked texts were beginning to reach his inner circle. Not through tabloids or gossip columns, but from people he trusted. It began with a call. A longtime friend from his army days, someone known for discretion, called him directly with a voice tight with tension. "Mate," the friend said, according to sources, "you need to see what's on Twitter. Something about Archie. Something serious." Harry allegedly brushed it off at first, accustomed to the ceaseless storm of speculation around his wife and family. But the friend insisted. "This isn't just trolling. There are screenshots. They're saying Meghan chose a donor. Without telling you." That was the moment everything began to unravel. According to a well-placed source familiar with Harry's movements that day, the prince initially refused to believe it. He thought it was a hoax, a smear campaign. He allegedly called his security detail and requested they retrieve a secure tablet so he could examine the screenshots himself. When he finally saw the messages, the phrasing, the tone, the timestamps, something in his demeanor reportedly changed instantly. He was silent, staring, then asked one simple question. Where did they get these? He didn't shout. He didn't panic. Those present say he went completely still. It was not the reaction of someone caught off guard by gossip. It was the reaction of a man recognizing something that rang disturbingly familiar. According to the same source, Harry read through the thread multiple times. Then he excused himself and went outside. For over an hour, he walked alone on the grounds, refusing calls, ignoring aides. When he finally returned, he allegedly said to a member of his team, I need to know if this is real. I need answers now." Within minutes, Harry had instructed his legal team to begin verifying the origins of the leak. But even as professionals scrambled to determine authenticity, the emotional damage had begun to take root. Those close to Harry say he seemed detached, almost disassociated, during the remainder of the evening. He kept blinking like he was trying to wake up from a dream, one staff member later recalled. And when people spoke to him, it was like he wasn't really hearing them. The timeline of events after that becomes more difficult to piece together, as Harry's movements went fully private. No photos, no sightings, no press releases. But based on palace insiders and trusted sources close to Harry's personal team, the next 48 hours were consumed with intense, private phone calls, many of them to Meghan. These conversations, from what little has been leaked, were far from peaceful. When Harry allegedly confronted Meghan about the texts, she initially denied them. She called them fake, called it a setup, claimed someone was trying to destroy their family. But according to two separate sources, when Harry pressed her on specific phrases, terms he remembered hearing her use in private, her demeanor shifted. Her voice, normally calm and polished, began to crack. And then she went silent. That silence was Harry's answer. He didn't need a confession. He didn't need a debate. He needed honesty, and what he received instead was omission. Meghan, according to one insider familiar with the call, never explicitly admitted to using a donor. But she also never denied it with clarity. When Harry allegedly asked her point blank, "Did you use someone else?" she reportedly answered, "What matters is we have a child who is loved. That's what matters." That sentence, though neutral on the surface, struck Harry like a dagger. He reportedly ended the call early, muttering only, "I need space," before hanging up. The next morning, Harry made contact with a private geneticist. According to sources familiar with the exchange, he wanted immediate DNA testing for Archie. Not out of hatred, not out of rage, but from a place of deep internal conflict. One source described Harry's emotional state as imploding. The child he had raised, the son he had protected, the boy who had become his motivation to build a new life, all of that was now covered in a fog of doubt. And it wasn't just about the child. It was about trust, about the unshakable feeling that he had been used. That his image, his love, his vulnerability had been manipulated to serve a narrative he had no control over. More importantly, Harry feared for Archie himself. What would it mean for the boy's future if the public narrative about his bloodline turned out to be false? If the truth became a weapon to tear down not just Harry's name, but the boy's entire identity? Would he lose his place in the family line? Would he be stripped of protection, respect, legacy? This is when, according to insiders, Harry entered a phase they described as complete withdrawal. He stopped answering calls. He canceled a planned media appearance. He deactivated his personal number. For nearly 3 days, no one outside of his security team had direct access to him. Reports began surfacing of Harry staying at an undisclosed countryside estate owned by a distant royal ally. It was there, according to sources, that he broke down in front of one of his closest confidants. "I gave her everything," he allegedly said. "And now I don't even know if my son is mine." That sentence was repeated verbatim across several independent sources, suggesting it wasn't a casual comment. It was a statement of devastation. Of a man who had endured years of public ridicule, institutional exile, and psychological trauma, only to be dealt the most personal blow of all. He was not just betrayed by the institution he fled. He was betrayed by the woman he fled with. The emotional fallout reportedly extended into other aspects of Harry's life. Friends say he began questioning every major decision he had made since 2018. The Oprah interview, the Netflix deal, the Spotify partnership, the lawsuits against the British press. All of it, he feared, had been built on a foundation of half-truths. A stage-managed narrative where he was both the protagonist and the pawn. At one point, according to a friend from Harry's army regiment, he told a confidant, "Maybe I never left the institution. Maybe I just built a new one with different walls." Meanwhile, Meghan was in Los Angeles, reportedly scrambling to contain the fallout. Sources say her legal team immediately issued cease and desist warnings to several tabloid editors, threatening defamation lawsuits over the publication of the texts. But behind the scenes, Meghan was said to be in a state of controlled panic. Not because she feared public backlash, she had faced that before. But because, according to a source close to her camp, she didn't expect Harry to take it this hard. Her calculation, if the texts are real, was that the truth would never surface, that the surrogate would stay silent, that Harry would never need to know. But now, With the world watching and Harry reportedly in emotional freefall, the narrative was spiraling beyond her control, and the palace was beginning to stir. Reports surfaced of senior royals convening emergency calls. While publicly the monarchy maintained its standard silence, behind closed doors, contingency plans were being discussed. One palace aide revealed that if Archie was confirmed not to be Harry's biological son, it could raise serious legal questions about titles, inheritance rights, and future protection status. Another senior advisor was quoted anonymously as saying, "This goes beyond scandal. This is a constitutional gray area we've never prepared for." Back in Harry's circle, the emotional toll continued to mount. Therapists close to the couple were reportedly called in to intervene, worried about Harry's psychological state. The man who had once stood at Diana's funeral with tears in his eyes, who had served 2 tours in Afghanistan, who had built an identity around protecting his family, was now confronted with the possibility that the foundation of that identity had been false. To compound matters, Harry was reportedly beginning to recall subtle red flags from the past. Moments when Meghan dodged questions, when medical documentation was never fully explained, when she insisted on privacy that seemed overly aggressive. At the time, he had taken it all as a product of trauma, of media abuse. But now, he allegedly saw those choices through a new lens, one of manipulation. The betrayal wasn't loud. It wasn't explosive. It was quiet, cumulative. A slow realization that he had possibly never been allowed into the most intimate decisions of his own family. Friends close to Harry say he began drafting a letter, a personal statement, not for the media, not for lawyers, but for Archie. A document that would someday explain everything, the truth, the silence, the confusion, the pain. In the letter, according to sources, he allegedly wrote, "If you're not mine by blood, you're still mine by heart. But I deserve to know. And so did you." That line, "You're still mine by heart," has since been quoted across forums and blogs as the ultimate sign of Harry's inner conflict. A man torn between love and truth, between devotion and deception. By the end of the week, Harry emerged from isolation, not with a public statement, not with a press conference, but with a silent appearance, walking into a private clinic in West London under heavy protection, carrying a small envelope. Sources believe it contained DNA material, potentially his own, submitted for comparison. When he exited, reporters called out to him, asked about the leaks, about the texts, about Archie. Harry didn't respond, but a photographer captured the look in his eyes. It wasn't anger. It wasn't fear. It was something deeper. Sadness. Maybe even grief. Because that's what betrayal looks like when it's quiet, when it's personal, when it's not about headlines, but about family. There are moments in royal history when the walls of the monarchy, normally shrouded in centuries of tradition and secrecy, begin to tremble under the weight of scandal. The morning after the leaked messages reached critical mass, the gilded corridors of Clarence House were anything but calm. Phones rang nonstop. Private advisors whispered with furrowed brows. Old protocols were pulled from dusty archives. This was not merely a family issue. It was a royal reckoning. By mid-morning, a private emergency meeting had been called. No formal titles, no media advisories, just a select handful of the most powerful individuals connected to the monarchy. King Charles III, recently recovering from health concerns, reportedly arrived first, earlier than expected. Dressed in plain clothing and visibly fatigued, Charles's presence was not merely symbolic. This was a crisis that threatened to rewrite the bloodline itself, and as sovereign, it was his responsibility to determine the monarchy's course. The meeting was held in a secure chamber within Clarence House, guarded and stripped of all recording devices. Those in attendance included Queen Camilla, Prince William, Princess Anne, and 2 of the monarch's most senior legal advisors. Noticeably absent was Prince Harry, though his absence was by no means accidental. According to insiders, the royal family had no intention of including him in this meeting. Not yet. Not until they had clarity on the facts. What they feared, however, was becoming unmistakably clear. The issue at hand wasn't just emotional. It was legal, constitutional, institutional. If Archie was not the biological son of Prince Harry, that revelation could ripple through centuries of hereditary tradition. Titles, protections, line of succession, even international diplomatic relations could be impacted. In modern times, the monarchy had never encountered a situation where a royal child might be falsely assumed to be of royal blood, not by accident, but by design. One of the first matters addressed in the meeting was the text messages themselves. Senior legal counsel had already begun authenticating the screenshots. At least 5 independent forensic analysts had confirmed that the metadata suggested the messages were genuine. The device ID, message timing, syntax patterns, and backup file timestamps all aligned. These were not fakes. This was evidence. Prince William, reportedly furious and visibly agitated during the meeting, was the first to break royal decorum. He allegedly pounded his fist on the table and said, if this is true, he was manipulated. And we were lied to. William's anger wasn't purely personal. He had always harbored reservations about Meghan's influence over Harry. But this was a violation of the family code, one that put the monarchy's credibility at risk. Camilla reportedly tried to strike a more measured tone. Though critical of Meghan in private, she stressed the importance of handling the situation delicately. We can't afford a public war, she allegedly said. Not with the world watching. Not when there's a child involved. But her call for diplomacy was quickly met with resistance from Princess Anne, known for her bluntness and disdain for theatrics, and reportedly said, this is no longer about just family. This is about fraud. If titles were granted under false assumptions, that is royal deception. We cannot sit on our hands. Her words hung in the air like a gavel dropped in a courtroom. At this point, King Charles reportedly asked to see the full legal implications spelled out clearly. One of the legal advisors laid out the potential fallout. If Archie was not the biological child of a royal, he could not legally retain a title tied to succession. If Meghan had intentionally misled the crown into believing otherwise, it could be considered an act of deceit with constitutional consequences. Any public funds used for his protection or support could come under scrutiny. Even international laws surrounding dual citizenship, security cooperation, and diplomatic recognition could be affected. The phrase constitutional crisis was mentioned more than once. The question then turned to strategy. What would the crown do next? The first proposal came from a senior legal mind. Initiate a private DNA verification process. The palace would not act based on media speculation. A formal request would be made, quietly, through a neutral party to verify the biological parentage of Archie. If Harry cooperated, it could be resolved discreetly. If not, the palace might need to consider a legal path, an unprecedented step that could include family court intervention. William supported the proposal. He deserves to know, he reportedly said. But so do we. Camilla again pushed back. He'll feel ambushed. We need to approach him through someone he trusts. That's when Princess Anne spoke again. There's no gentle way to tell a man his legacy may not be his own. We owe him the truth, not comfort. As the arguments continued, an unexpected name was brought up. Doria Ragland, Meghan's mother. While generally viewed as an outsider to royal affairs, Doria had always maintained a quiet but steady presence. She was considered level-headed, and more importantly, one of the few people Meghan truly listened to. Some in the room believed that contacting Doria might help Meghan face the situation with less defensiveness. Others feared it would simply give her more time to spin a counter-narrative. By midday, the group had settled on a strategy, a 3-tier response plan. First, attempt to contact Harry privately and urge him to confirm the facts. Do not accuse. Do not threaten. Simply express concern and request clarity. Second, prepare a legal contingency in case the matter escalated. This included reviewing royal titles granted to Archie and Lilibet, assessing their legitimacy, and preparing statements in the event of public disclosure. Third, monitor Meghan's PR team. If a media counterattack began, the palace would release its own carefully worded statement emphasizing transparency, tradition, and the need for truth within the royal institution. Before the meeting adjourned, King Charles requested silence from everyone. If we lose the public's trust over this, he allegedly said, we don't just lose credibility. We lose history. The group sat in silence for nearly a full minute. Following the meeting, individual members began making discreet calls. Prince William reportedly reached out to mutual friends still in touch with Harry, urging them to tell him the family was concerned, not judgmental. Princess Anne ordered a review of all royal correspondences that involved Archie's birth and early days. Queen Camilla reached out to a trusted media contact with a vague request. Watch the tide. If it shifts too fast, call me. Back at Kensington Palace, William paced in his study. According to a trusted aide, he had begun reviewing old photos. Pictures of Harry as a child, of Diana, of their shared moments before everything became fractured. For William, this wasn't just about scandal. It was about watching the last connection to his brother slip away under the weight of deception. And while all of this unfolded behind closed doors, outside, the media was beginning to sense something deeper was happening. Photographers noticed more activity at royal properties. Schedulers reported canceled engagements. PR teams for all senior royals had gone silent. In royal circles, silence is often more revealing than any press release. It signaled containment, strategy, damage control. But the clock was ticking. Across the ocean in California, Meghan had reportedly begun activating her own defense strategy. Calls to lawyers, emails to crisis managers, requests to identify the source of the leak. Her team began preparing what insiders called a narrative reset, a document framing the surrogate's claims as personal revenge, asserting the messages were taken out of context, and that Meghan's concern for optics was related to media safety, not branding. But insiders say the palace wasn't buying it. Not this time. Back in London, a quiet but critical decision was made. All honors and mentions of Archie and Lilibet on the official royal website would be temporarily frozen. No updates, no changes, but also no new acknowledgments. A digital pause. It was a signal, not to the public, but to Meghan. A signal that the institution was preparing to challenge the assumptions it had previously embraced. Later that evening, another private meeting took place, this one between King Charles and his closest legal advisor. The topic was inheritance. Specifically, whether an heir not of royal blood could be legally included in the royal will without disclosure. The advisor's answer was stark. Technically, yes, but morally and institutionally, it would raise significant issues. Charles reportedly sighed and said, "Then we must be prepared, not just for what is true, but for what it will cost us." This wasn't just about Meghan anymore. It wasn't just about Harry. It was about the institution's survival in an age where secrets no longer stayed buried, where private texts could spark public firestorms, and where one woman's alleged deception could upend centuries of carefully preserved legacy. The monarchy was bracing for impact, and the next steps would not just decide the future of Archie. They would decide the future of the crown itself. Her voice was calm, deliberate, and laced with a quiet sorrow that couldn't be faked. She did not cry. She didn't raise her voice. But there was something in the steadiness of her delivery, something raw and human, that made her words cut deeper than any scream ever could. For weeks, she had remained silent, watching as the screenshots of her private messages with Meghan Markle exploded across global media, forums, and social channels. Watching as debates erupted over whether she was a liar, a whistleblower, or something in between. But now, for the first time, she was stepping forward. Not behind a pseudonym, not through a proxy, but with her face, her name, and a truth she said had haunted her since the moment she signed the agreement. The interview was pre-recorded. A deliberate decision. She wanted her words to be uninterrupted, unspun. No live audience. No commercial breaks. Just her, across from a trusted female journalist she had specifically requested. The lighting was soft but not dramatic. No theatricality. Just honesty. She began with how she was selected. Not randomly, not through a typical agency lottery, but through a private network that handled high-profile surrogacy cases for celebrities, tech elites, and ultra-wealthy families. She had been a surrogate twice before. She knew the process. She had boundaries, experience, and a clean medical record. When she received the anonymous request in early 2018, she was intrigued but cautious. She didn't know who the clients were at first. Just that they wanted discretion, beauty, and a fast-track process. "I was told they were globally known," she began. "That privacy would be non-negotiable. At first, I didn't ask too many questions. That's how this industry works. You know when it's not your story to tell." But it felt different right away. She recounted the first conversation with Meghan. It was not in person. It was over a secure Zoom line. Meghan introduced herself directly, not with handlers, and spoke with what the surrogate described as incredible charisma. But even during that first call, the surrogate noticed Meghan's tone was unusually transactional. She talked about creating a family like someone talks about launching a brand. The surrogate said, "It wasn't cruel, just clinical, like everything was pre-scripted." She described how the topic of sperm donors came up early, far earlier than normal. Meghan, according to the surrogate, said she wanted to keep options open, and ensure the child had all the best qualities of both worlds. At first, the surrogate assumed this meant using Harry's genetic material, with an egg donor perhaps. But slowly, through coded language and dodged questions, it became clear that Meghan was exploring other donor options entirely. She never said, "I want to use a donor instead of Harry," the surrogate clarified. She said things like, "We want to make sure the child represents modern royalty." She used phrases like progressive optics, biracial strength, and global appeal. It wasn't medical. It was marketing. The surrogate admitted she didn't push back immediately. She was paid handsomely, more than she had been in any of her previous surrogacies. And the contract was ironclad. Non-disclosure agreements covered nearly every aspect of her life, from personal communication to social media posts. From post-birth interviews to therapy sessions, there were clauses that restricted her from even describing what kind of music she listened to during pregnancy, for fear it could be used to trace back to the child. But money doesn't erase conscience. As the process unfolded, the surrogate became increasingly uneasy. One of the most disturbing moments came when she was presented with the donor profile. She was told to administer the sperm sample at a specific clinic, under a very tight window. She was never given a name, only a number. But she was able to see a childhood photo of the donor, allegedly provided to Meghan through private back channels. It was that photo, she said, that made everything feel undeniably real. "He wasn't Harry," she said. "And I knew in that moment, this wasn't a backup plan. This was the plan." She said she didn't want to be part of a lie, that she raised the concern with Meghan twice. "I told her, this doesn't feel right. He's your husband. You should know." And she told me, very calmly, he wouldn't understand. "It's better this way. He's sensitive about legacy. I'm protecting him." That phrase, "I'm protecting him," haunted the surrogate. It implied not just control, but condescension. As if Harry's understanding of parenthood could be shaped for him. As if the truth could be molded into whatever fit the narrative best. Over the months that followed, the surrogate says her contact with Meghan became increasingly limited. Communication shifted from direct chats to intermediaries, lawyers, assistants, and security consultants. Every interaction was documented. Every message filtered. She began to feel like a vessel, not a person. "I wasn't asked how I was feeling," she said. "I wasn't asked about dreams or cravings or emotions. It was always, are the vitals normal? Is the development on track? Are there any irregularities?" After the successful delivery, which reportedly occurred in a high-security wing of a private facility, she was escorted out by security, handed a check, and given a parting gift, a handwritten note from Meghan that simply read, "Thank you for helping build the future." There was no photograph taken together. No goodbye hug. No follow-up. At first, the surrogate tried to move on. She returned to her home. She focused on her own family. But the story began to eat away at her. She watched the media coverage, the staged public appearances, the carefully curated documentaries. She watched Harry cradle the child, speak lovingly about fatherhood, talk about his ears and Meghan's smile. And something inside her cracked. I kept telling myself it wasn't my place, that it wasn't my life. But I had the truth. I had the texts, the paperwork, the dates. I watched a father love a child who might not be his, and I couldn't shake the feeling that he was being lied to. She didn't want money. She didn't want revenge. She wanted release. The surrogate explained that what ultimately pushed her to act wasn't guilt. It was a moment of terrifying clarity. Her own child, now 5 years old, had asked her one night, "Did I come from your belly?" She had smiled, nodded, and told him the story of his birth. But then she thought of Archie, of the boy growing up in the middle of a media storm, in a family fractured by secrecy, and she realized that she had been part of something that could rob him of the truth forever. She reached out to a journalist she trusted, not one from a tabloid, not a clickbait operator, but someone known for integrity. She handed over the messages, the clinic receipts, the donor profile codes, everything. "I didn't want to destroy anyone," she said, "but I also couldn't keep protecting a secret that big. It wasn't just about them anymore. It was about what's right." Throughout the interview, her voice remained steady. She did not dramatize her role. In fact, she took great care to avoid character assassination. She even acknowledged that Meghan had been kind to her, at first. But the betrayal wasn't in the tone of the messages. It was in what they represented. That a woman entrusted with creating a life had, allegedly, manipulated that process without the knowledge or consent of the child's father. "I don't think Meghan is evil," the surrogate said quietly. But I do think she was obsessed with the story. She wanted the perfect narrative. The mixed-race royal baby. The break from tradition. The rebranding of the crown. And somewhere in all of that, she forgot the truth matters. The surrogate revealed that she had been threatened with lawsuits. That Meghan's legal team had sent cease and desist letters, demanded her silence, accused her of breach. But none of those letters denied the content of the texts. They only threatened consequences if she spoke. That detail, more than anything, was the silent confirmation the public needed. When the interview ended, the journalist asked one final question. What do you want Harry to know? There was a long pause. Then, the surrogate replied that none of this was his fault. That I don't think he knew. That I believe he loves his son more than anything. And that no matter what the DNA says, love is real. But so is the truth. And he deserves both. With that, she stood up. The interview ended. And across the world, millions watched as a woman many had never seen before brought the entire weight of a hidden truth crashing into the spotlight. The moment the surrogate's interview aired, the global media response erupted like a volcano long overdue. It was no longer whispers in forums or speculation in comment sections. It was primetime news. Headlines ran in real-time updates. From London to Los Angeles, New Delhi to Sydney, every news network, social media channel, and political commentator was zeroing in on the same question. If Prince Harry didn't know, and Meghan orchestrated it all, what now? The backlash came in fast, brutal, and unrelenting. And this time, it wasn't just the usual critics sharpening their knives. Even figures who had long defended Meghan Markle found themselves pausing, reassessing, backpedaling. The surrogate's calm delivery, the receipts she presented, the authenticity of her emotions, it all made the narrative impossible to ignore. This wasn't tabloid innuendo. This was now a question of deception on a scale few had dared to imagine. One of the first international reactions came from the BBC. Known for its reserved tone when covering the royal family, it released a breaking report with the headline, "Surrogate claims Prince Harry may not be father of Archie, palace declines comment." Their report included clips from the interview.